When I moved to Monterey County in about 2007, I wanted to get to know my new county, and I saw an opportunity where they were asking people if they'd like to serve on a civil grand jury. So I did that for 1 year. It was a really rewarding experience. But Marilyn Maxner found it so rewarding that she's actually done it 3 times because it is an extraordinary amount of work. So I'd like to introduce Marilyn, who will be introducing our speakers.
Well, we have 2 speakers here today who will give you a presentation about the county civil grand jury and what it does. Tom is retired from the Naval Postgraduate School. He was on the 2021 grand jury when everything had to be done by Zoom because it was COVID. Interviews with people, talking to anybody you were going to investigate, having meetings. Fortunately, when I was on it, we got to meet in person. It was much better. He's the president of our Monterey County Grand Jury Association and helped start it. And Maria Garcia was on the 2019-20 and 2021 civil grand juries, also the Zoom type, but she was foreperson for both of those juries. And she helped start the local chapter of the Monterey County Grand Jurors Association too. Tom is currently the president. Marie and I are both on the board, as are 2 or 3 other people. So I think that's enough of an introduction. And Tom and Maria, if you'll come on up and get started.
Good afternoon. Marilyn took most of what I have for the first slide. So thank you so much for having us. We're representatives of the Monterey County chapter for the California Grand Jurors Association, and we're really pleased to be here with you this afternoon. Today we're going to give you some information and maybe some interesting stories about the Monterey County Civil Grand Jury. My co-presenter for today's session is Tom Mastre. He's the president of the Monterey County Chapter Civil Grand Jury Association, and he was a member, as Marilyn said, of the 2020-2021 Monterey County Civil Grand Jury. I'm Maria Garcia. I am vice president of the local chapter, and I was a member of the 2019-2020, 2020-2021 Monterey County Civil Grand Juries. So to launch our presentation this afternoon, please welcome Tom.
Thank you. Quite a long time ago, I was involved in doing presentations as well, and they told me that applause at the beginning was hope. And applause in the middle is faith. And applause at the end is charity. The civil grand jury is kind of an interesting aspect of California life. The grand jury is built into the California Constitution, but in 1880, there were statutes that were developed that allowed the grand jury to do investigations of county governments. And that involves pretty much any part of the county government. An example of that happened in 1890. The San Francisco grand jurors issued a report that denounced fraud, extravagance, waste in municipal government, calling out attention to personal profits that were made on street widening projects, rail franchises, and all things of that nature. In 1974, there was a review of the grand jury just in general, and it was found that California and Nevada are the only 2 states that have civil grand juries that are allowed to investigate the county governments. So we're kind of unique in that way. So what exactly can the civil grand jury investigate? And it is an investigation. The short answer to that question is pretty much anything in the county that involves public money. So if you have a contract with a nonprofit, you can investigate, is that contract working correctly? The main theme is to promote the efficient and honest, effective government. The civil grand jury is charged to investigate jails within the county. So we have 3 of them in this county. Unusual, but happens. We're charged to investigate misconduct, and later on we'll talk about a report that about misconduct of a public official. And what we're allowed to do is investigate pretty much anything that goes on in the county. We can inspect the books of the county. We can inspect records, anything that has to do with finance. It has to do with HR, for example. And we have subpoena power as a grand jury as well. So sometimes some of the departments might want to drag their feet. If you offer that, would a subpoena help you? They usually tend to come across with what we needed.
So the California Penal Code specifies how many jurors sit on the grand jury. For Monterey County, that number is 19. Each year around April or May, the Monterey Superior Court puts out a call for jurors. They review applications, they conduct informational briefings, and then they interview potential jurors. The judge reviews the applicants who made the interview cut, and then the judge's panel decide on 30 people to be invited for selection and impanelment. At the selection and impanelment ceremony, all 30 names go into a container, which here in Monterey County is kind of like the bingo spinner. And the names are drawn out one at a time until we have 19 jurors. And then the remaining names are also drawn out one at a time until we have 11 alternates or we run out of names, whichever comes first. Now that part's important because the alternates are called up in the order that they were drawn. So the last alternate drawn doesn't come up first. So it's alternate number 1. If something happens to one of the 19 jurors, then they go to the alternate list, and they go down the alternate list until they find someone who's willing to go and serve on the jury. So how is the jury structured and how does it operate? And depending on how you look at it, it's either a really beautiful thing or it's a terrible thing that there is no prescribed structure to how a civil grand jury operates. The civil grand jury is a collegial body, which means that there is no hierarchy and every voice is equal. However, you still do need a spokesperson or a main point of contact for the group, so each jury has a foreperson. And the foreperson is selected by the presiding judge after another application and interview process. And if the foreperson is absent for some reason, the pro tem steps in to cover the foreperson, and the pro tem is actually chosen by the jury. The foreperson is responsible for the oversight, direction, and promoting collegiality among the jury. I still remember my first year as foreperson during a break in our first plenary session, and a plenary session is a meeting of the whole jury, so all 19 members. But during a break in the plenary session, one of the jurors walked up to me and said, I was very brave to be the foreperson because she had been reading the procedure manual, and the procedure manual had said that the foreperson was essentially responsible for the success or failure of the entire jury. As if I wasn't anxious enough at that point. So every grand jury can create their own structure, their own procedures and meeting schedules. They determine what other officer positions may be needed, such as a recording secretary, a corresponding secretary, a sergeant at arms, a treasurer, etc. And they decide what to investigate and what reports to approve for publication. Now, you may wonder how each civil grand jury figures out how they do what they do, especially since in most years it's 19 brand new people. But never fear. The law requires that training is provided for the civil grand jury. And so the county provides a local orientation, and then the California Grand Jury Association provides a 2-day training opportunity. And then later on they provide a 1-day writing workshop when you get ready to write your reports. And so that the local orientation and the 2-day training, they cover pretty much everything that a civil grand jury needs to know. Well, the basics anyway. And then the rest of it you make up as you go along. Plenary meetings, again, that's a meeting of the whole jury, 19 people. They're held to receive committee reports. There's some training involved, intergroup training, and then they discuss topics. The full jury votes whether to proceed with an investigation, and the full jury votes whether to approve a report for publication. And one of those, the whether to approve a report for publication requires a supermajority vote, and that's 12 people. So it's pretty structured. The frequency of the plenary meetings is up to the jury. I believe the last couple of years of the civil grand jury, they meet every week. The juries that I sat on, I think they would have killed me if we met every week. So we only met twice a month, and we always scheduled our second meeting with the note that it could be canceled if there was nothing for the plenary to receive. That way all of the work, my idea was that all the work would be done by committee, and then they'd come to the plenary for the blessing, so as not to waste people's time. As an individual juror, you participate in investigative and administrative committees. Individual jurors conduct research, they develop the questions for interviews, they conduct the interviews, they analyze the data from the research, and they participate in generating reports. Now I say participate in generating the reports because there's always one in every group who is a stellar writer, and that person does all the writing, and then all the other people get to be the nitpickers and say, I wouldn't put that word there, I wouldn't put that word there, let's put this in. So they participate in generating the report. Jurors also go on site visits. Some of it's related to investigations, some of it's part of the information gathering phase, and some of the visits are required by law. Now, if all of this makes it sound like it's all work and no play, I assure you it's not. One of my favorite committees when I was on the jury was our Snacks and Social Committee. Right? Doesn't that sound like a committee everyone wants to be involved in? They were responsible for the food and the fun, and our treasurer also had to mind their budget. But then as we moved along during the year, other jurors would say, oh, I want to do a celebration for this. And so that sparked our holiday gathering. It sparked our Mardi Gras celebration, which we have continued beyond our years as jurors. We'd have lunch or dinners after field trips. So there's a real feeling of camaraderie when you're working with these 19 people and you're together for a lot of time. One of the things that I think is a huge benefit of being on the civil grand jury is that jurors have access to people and places that are difficult for an ordinary citizen to get. As part of our training, you get orientation briefings with whoever you choose. Like one year we had, I think, a couple of supervisors come and meet with the jury. You meet with county counsel, the chief administrative officer, the directors of the different divisions, and they come and they talk to you for an hour and they tell you things that they wouldn't tell an ordinary citizen. So, yeah, the tax collector was a favorite. As part of each jury's charge, as Tom mentioned, they're expected to review the condition and the management of public prisons within the county. And in order to do that, we get to go on field trips. It's one of the field trips I mentioned. My second year of service during the COVID lockdown was during the COVID lockdown, so that jury didn't get to go on any field trips. Sorry, Tom. But in my first year of service, we visited the juvenile hall, the old one, not the new one, unfortunately. We visited the youth center, Rancho Cielo, where the Silver Star Youth Program is held, the Soledad Correctional Training Facility, the Salinas Valley State Prison, and the Monterey County Jail. All fun places. When we visited the Monterey County Jail, there had been some storms in the area recently and some construction, so the power was out. And they were running on a backup generator. And wouldn't you know it, the power cut out in the middle of our tour. So does anyone here watch shows like Criminal Minds? Yeah, they've had at least a couple of episodes where the team's in prison conducting their interviews for some reason or another, and suddenly the power goes out, and next thing you know, you start hearing the cell doors open. Luckily, that didn't happen to us. We made our way to one of the control rooms, and we stayed there while they worked on getting us switched over to another backup generator. And that was really interesting because we got to see, again, another part of the prison or the jail that other people wouldn't normally see. We got to see all of the different cameras, and they were talking to us about response times and answering all of our questions. So it was unexpected, but still interesting. And it was taking them a while to get connected to the second backup generator, and so they decided you guys should all leave. So we're leaving this control room that's in the middle of the jail in the dark. We all linked hands so no one would get lost, and we made our way down the darkened hallways to the outside of the jail. It was a little disconcerting, I will not lie, but our curiosity did get the better of us, and we scheduled a time to actually go back to the jail and finish our tour. And the highlight of that second visit, not another power outage, was we actually got to see firsthand where the prison break happened. So between our first visit and the second visit, a couple of prisoners escaped, and we asked specifically to see how they broke out. So that was fun. So other juries have gone to visit the landfill, they've gone to Moss Landing to visit the harbor master, the 911 communication center, and so on. And as I said earlier, the access to information as a civil grand juror is really amazing.
This, I think, is really an important point. We're about to go into a series of reports. The grand jury is sworn to secrecy, and that's why the county officials will talk to you and say things to you that they might not say to other people in a public situation, because we're private. We're sworn to be quiet for the rest of our lives about things that went on in the grand jury. But the only way the grand jury can communicate with the public is via the reports. And the reports are written in a very specific way. There's a summary, there's a background information, there's discussion about the methodology, there's discussion about the problem that we were looking into, the section about findings, what did we find when we interviewed or reviewed reports, and then there are recommendations and required responses. So we make a series of recommendations in the report, and we direct those recommendations to the various departments and entities that we've talked to. In California law, there's a required response time to those recommendations. So each of those departments is supposed to, and people are supposed to respond within a specific amount of time, either 90 days or 60 days, depending on whether you're an individual or department. So now we're going to go through some of the reports just to illustrate some of the things that you might find while you're working on a grand jury. This one's kind of an interesting one. There's 64 special districts in Monterey County. Did you know that? No. So what's a special district? A special district is a governing body that's created by a vote of the people of the county. In Monterey County, Salinas Valley Health is a special district. Monterey County Transit's a special district. The King City Cemetery District is a special district. And this one, the airport, is a special district as well. This is kind of an interesting report. It was developed in 2019-2020 civil grand jury. And it's primarily focused on the financing of the move of the terminal at the Monterey airport. So it's pertinent today because if you go to the airport, there's a lot of ground that moved around out there where the new terminal building's going to be developed. What this report found, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the possibilities of who was on this committee that developed this report. What this report found was that there's about $62 million that's going to be the local share of developing that new terminal building. And they've also found that the airport district was overestimating by about 8% the traffic that was coming through the airport that would help support that, the payment for the rebuild of the terminal building. I might point out that this is a fairly technical, financial oriented report. So you might think that somebody on that particular committee that developed that report had a pretty good financial background in order to do the analysis for this. And that's what's interesting about one of the things that's interesting about the grand jury, and that is you're a group of people, your colleagues. Everybody has a different expertise that's involved in doing a report. Some people are financially oriented, some people are writers, as Maria said it earlier. It's a real interesting, some people are really good at doing interviews and eliciting information that might not have come out otherwise. So this is a really interesting report as well. I hear laughter, and that probably means that some of you have driven down Fremont Street. And some of you might have wondered, who in their right mind would put this is a class 4 bike lane that doesn't connect on either end down the middle of Fremont Street? Well, somebody on this grand jury, this was the 2020-2021 civil grand jury, the one that I was on where we did all Zooms. Except for this, they went out and actually did a field trip to take this picture of the bike lane. Well, if you read this report, most of the information and the findings and recommendations has to do with architectural review. You might think there was probably an architect that was on this particular, well, or maybe two. So, but what's interesting about this report, aside from the findings that they had, was the financing was a really interesting aspect of the report. The project took about $10 million. I don't know if it looks like $10 million to me, but it's a $10 million project. About 80% of that money came outside of Monterey County, came from outside of Monterey County. A thing that they actually did along with making the bike lanes is they made the crosswalks all ADA compliant. They did upgraded some of the infrastructure that's under the sidewalks. So there was work that was done beside just doing the bike lane down the middle of Fremont Street. Have you all wondered why they would? Yeah, me too. This is one of the reasons why I became involved in the civil grand jury. I wanted to know more about how the county government worked. And then I found out that the budget, and this is pretty current, the budget for this year for just the county is about $1.9 billion. And I figured that's a lot of money. Well, not a lot of my money, but it's a lot of money that's being spent by the county of all of our money. And I wanted to know a little bit more about what was going on with it and how it was being spent. When you drill into the budget, there's about $400 million that's discretionary money that gets spent on contracts and that kind of thing. A lot of it has to do with salaries and benefits, but there's about $400 million that has to do with contracting. So this report examined the contracting department, contracting and purchasing department in the county. And it found a really interesting set of information. When you read this report, it's actually pretty interesting. It found that purchasing and contracting is decentralized across the Monterey County government. And you think about that, it's like $400 million that's being handed out to the different departments without real good overview of contracts that are being let in one department versus something that's being let in a different department. And the negotiation of the contracts is done by people who are in the departments, and a lot of times they're just the staff of the department without a lot of training on how to do negotiations and so on. So this report made some recommendations about training and gathering information into a more centralized database so that it could be utilized by different departments. So if one department is doing a negotiation about vehicles and another department is doing a separate negotiation about doing vehicles, maybe there'd be some benefit for them to get together and do it as one group. Again, recommendations. One of the recommendations in this report was to upgrade the online training that each of the departments had to take, were supposed to take. And we did the same presentation to a group of OSHA online learning people. And one of the people that was in the presentation, that was listening to the presentation, actually had upgraded the online training after this report came out. So it was gratifying to hear that there is actually some benefit and actions are being taken by the government.
So a big question that we often get asked at these presentations, or I guess almost any time you talk about having served on a civil grand jury, is does the civil grand jury work make a difference? So this report, we call it the Cell Tower Report because that's a really long title. So the Cell Tower Report was done by the 2019-2020 Civil Grand Jury, and it certainly made a difference. What started this report was a citizen's complaint, as a lot of, I can't say a lot of reports, as many reports do. They get started with a citizen's complaint. And briefly, in October of 2018, a land use permit was approved for the construction of a cell tower in South County without going through a design committee, without presenting the idea and the design to the community. Construction started early in August of 2019, again, without sending the design to the South County Land Use Advisory Committee for review. And that committee, the South County Land Use Advisory Committee, should have received the application before construction began. And then there were other areas in this neighborhood that would have been even more suitable for the construction of the cell tower, but they were never explored. So someone just said, let's pop a cell tower down there, and boom, the county went ahead and moved forward with it. Since the publication of this report, the Monterey County Resource Management Agency, which was renamed, it's not RMA anymore, has increased its outreach to South County community, and it's raised its sensitivity and oversight on subsequent applications. And the findings and recommendations in the report were all accepted by the Board of Supervisors, and they developed standard operating procedures for each step in the permit request process. And some of this was actually happening while the report was being written, because the local government officials, they're not stupid. When the civil grand jury sends you a request for an interview, you start thinking, what is it that they could possibly be investigating? And then they go to the interview and they hear the questions and they're thinking, I'll bet you it's related to XYZ. And so they already started putting the wheels in motion before we even released the report to address some of the things that were addressed in the report. So does the civil grand jury make a difference? I think it does. And this report is a really good example of how the civil grand jury can make a long-lasting impact on the community.
Before we leave that, it's also important to note that's a real picture of the cell tower.
That was taken on one of the field trips down there. That committee took a lot of field trips to South County. And I don't think it was just to take the pictures. I think it's because one of the jurors actually lived there and he made really good barbecue. Okay, so have you guys noticed any big empty Monterey Salinas Transit buses driving around? Yeah, does it annoy you to see that? Imagining how wasteful it must be to be driving that big bus around town that's mostly empty? Well, it annoyed someone enough to write a citizen's complaint to the civil grand jury, and it interested the 2022-2023 civil grand jury enough to investigate. And in the course of their investigation, it was discovered that the public perception of underutilization of buses is not consistent with the logistics and mandates of the fleet. Boy, that was a mouthful. So, in short, the civil grand jury found that the buses were not being underutilized, and they found the reason why they weren't being underutilized. As part of their investigation, they found that MST, Monterey Salinas Transit, they collect data every time someone boards and gets off a bus. So the MST knows what size bus is needed for a particular route at its most heavily trafficked period. And that's the bus that they send out on the route. And they don't change to a smaller size bus during the lesser traffic times because it's more inefficient to send that big bus back to the yard and send out a small bus. So what the public perceives as underutilization is actually efficiency, and it's all based on data, and that's what the civil grand jury discovered. And during the course of their investigation, they also found that MST does have some electric vehicles, and they use diesel from renewable sources, And they want to have more electric vehicles, but the county needs to expand the infrastructure for electric charging stations for them to make having more electric buses a viable thing. And MST does provide many supportive services that a lot of the community probably don't know about. They have training centers. They assist during community disasters. So if an evacuation is called, they send out buses to help with the evacuation so that there are less private vehicles on the road during that time of crisis. They offer commuter rental vans. This was an eye-opener for me. They have on-call minibuses in South County where you can call for one of the little buses to pick you up, and they'll drop you off at one of the hubs where you can pick a regular line to another place. And then they do MST rides, which is it's a van for the physically challenged people. So MST does a lot of good that the public doesn't know about, and the civil grand jury investigation dug up a lot of that when they were looking at what the public perception of MST was and whether or not the buses were underutilized. And instead of finding an inefficient transportation system, as the complaint suggested, the jury found a well-run system that's serving our community, and it's all based on data. I guess I could hit the button myself, but...
But it keeps me awake.
Oh, okay. One of the negatives about a civil grand jury is the one and done aspect of it. Once a jury's final report is published, the only follow-up you get is at the start of the next jury's term when the responses to the reports are being received and then they get published. So where's the continuity? How can we ensure compliance? In 2021, the 2020-2021 Civil Grand Jury did a comprehensive review of the responses to the 2019-2020 Civil Grand Jury's reports, and they discovered that 39% of the agencies involved did not respond in the time frame required by the Penal Code, and 55% of them failed to respond to the criteria outlined in that code. So a continuity report such as this does a couple of things. It lets local government agencies know that each civil grand jury is keeping an eye on the store, so to speak. It gives subsequent civil grand juries potential topics for investigation by revisiting prior reports to ensure that findings are being addressed and recommendations are being implemented. And that's really the only enforcement tool in the civil grand jury's toolbox, to look at a report that's been published by another civil grand jury and investigate as to whether that government agency complied with the report's findings and recommendations and complied with their responses to the findings and recommendations. So the continuity committee ensures as much as possible a seamless transition for the jury. They're responsible for monitoring the filing of the required responses and to do a follow-up if needed. And then the other piece of that continuity is that some of the civil grand juries, they decide that they're going to take a look back for 5 years, and they'll pick out reports that sound interesting, and they'll go and they'll reinvestigate. And the reinvestigation could be as simple as sending a letter to the agency saying, hey, remember this report? Remember what you said you did? Did you do what you said you did? Can you prove to us what you said you did? And then get that response back. And I know on my second year on the jury, we did some of that, and a lot of times we found good responses from the agencies that we looked at. And having a continuity report like this is really helpful for the public to see, because, I mean, if you saw a report that said 39% of the local agencies aren't doing what they said they're supposed to be doing, wouldn't that, I mean, it would give you pause, right? So, and that gives me pause.
I was awake. So the question is, who can serve on the civil grand jury? Will I make the cut? So this is kind of a funny question for this group. Are you interested in public affairs of the community? Are you a citizen, and have you lived in the county for more than a year? Are you older than 18? Are you in good health? And the quote is actually from the code. Do you possess, quote, natural faculties, facilities of ordinary intelligence, sound judgment, and fair character. Now, this is one that's actually really important. Are you open-minded and respect the views of others? It is a collegial group. Everybody's vote is the same value in this group. And I can tell you from personal experience, when you want to do an investigation, you have to get the group on board. And if you don't, they vote you down. It might have happened. So, going along with that, if you have an agenda before you go in, probably not a good place to be. You know, if there's something that I'm going to make a change to X, and you find that that's not quite how it works. You investigate, you gather data, you write the report, you hope that the agency will make the changes, the recommendations that you've done. And then lastly, can you work collaboratively as a team? So there's a lot of these will I make the cut questions. Do you have access to a computer and do you know how to use it? That was really important in the year that I served because everything was on Zoom. Now the upside to being on Zoom for me was coffee was about 20 feet that way. I only had to dress from the waist up. And I could hit the mute button when something was going on behind me that shouldn't have been shared. So, can you ask questions, help write reports? Again, this is a group thing, so you don't have to have all of these expertise. Somebody on the jury will help with it. English is an important thing because the reports are now being published in 2 languages, English and Spanish in Monterey County. So reports do get translated into Spanish, but most of the interviews and stuff take place in English. Are you interested in the efficiency of local government? This group. And then I think this last 2 things are really important. Maria said that she only did plenary meetings twice a month, and she did. And they lasted, about an hour and a half. But when you start getting into investigations, and if you're on more than one investigative committee, you're spending probably 25 to 30 hours a week, every week, doing the investigations, compiling the data, writing the report. So it ebbs and flows, but there are really busy times during the year when you're working as a civil grand juror. There's more. Can you keep a secret? I mentioned this earlier. The reason that the civil grand jury gets information that others don't get is because we are sworn to keep secret. Somebody will come up and say, "What did you work on?" "Well, I worked on all of them." You know. "Who did you investigate?" That, out of bounds, you can't tell you that. So if you can meet all of those criteria, you're eligible to be a member of the civil grand jury. And like Maria said, it is like the bingo bin. You get tumbled in there, one at a time gets pulled out, and that's the order. The last thing, though, I think is an important point, too. Even if you don't want to be a member of the civil grand jury, you can write a complaint about something that's really irritating you. It's a standard form. It's on the civil grand jury, Monterey County Civil Grand Jury website. It's easy to fill out. The ones that are successful in terms of success, meaning ones that the grand jury takes up and wants to investigate, are ones that provide enough information to show that the issue is relevant, important, and gives the grand jury a little bit of a head start in direction to do the investigation. There you go.
And also, if it's not obvious that it's a personal vendetta or something that's going to be handled during the course of regular government actions. So what's in it for me? For the past few minutes, Tom focused on the qualifications needed to join the civil grand jury, but what are the benefits and rewards? There are many. And let's start from the last bullet. You'll develop relationships with other interested citizens. There are 19 people, and here in this group, in your organization, you're all here because you share the same interest in your organization's mission statement. These 19 people are from all walks of life, all different levels of education, career, and you're all thrown into this room, and the only thing that you have in common is your willingness to serve the county and to make local government better. And when I stop and think about the 19 people that I served with the first year and the 19 people I served with the second year, those are people I probably would not have met during the course of my life. And I will tell you though, when my father died last year, the people that I first told about it were not my friends from college, not my friends from work. I reached out to my friends from the civil grand jury and let them know. So for me, that group had a huge impact in terms of relationship building. You'll be able to develop relationships with other interested citizens. You'll get a lot of personal satisfaction at having a positive impact. Even if you don't see the change happening from your report like that the cell tower committee did, they saw immediate change based on their investigation and their report. Even if you don't see that immediate change, I think you'll feel just so much better that instead of just sitting and complaining about something, you went out and did something about it. You'll develop some new skills. So for the people that weren't computer literate in the first and second year, by the end of their terms, they knew how to attach a file to their emails, how to password protect emails, how to PDF documents and email them to each other. So you'll learn those skills. And then probably some of the softer skills like working with people from diverse backgrounds and culture. You'll learn about our local government, that for sure. There are things that I think even the most seasoned people learned about their local government during the course of their service as civil grand jurors. And you'll earn $15 a day. So just remember though, it's a volunteer, this is a volunteer opportunity. And you do get your $15 a day any day that you do something that's related to the civil grand jury, and you get a whopping 67 cents per mile anytime you have to drive. But all that aside, I think it's all of the other things that were listed underneath those that are reasons to serve on the civil grand jury. Okay, last slide. Last slide, I promise. Oh, second to the last slide. Okay. So here our bullets are a little bit flipped, but the process to get involved starts with filling out an application, and then when your application is received, you get invited to attend an orientation and interview session. So the orientation and interview sessions for the 2024-2025 Monterey County Civil Grand Jury are actually being held this afternoon in Monterey and tomorrow afternoon in Salinas, so we're a little bit late coming to ask you, but think about it for next year, and then remember the citizens' complaints. So after the interviews, like we said already, the judge gathers the information, she presents it to her fellow judges, and if they all approve, then the 30 names get invited back for the impanelment and selection. Your name gets tossed into the bingo container, it gets pulled out by Vanna, not Vanna. Prettier than Vanna, and then the alternates and all of that. The applications are online. You can find them at the Superior Court website or the Monterey County website for the civil grand jurors. That QR code actually works, our dinosaur and all. Okay. So any questions for us?
Thank you for your report. I want to know what could possibly happen to help the road to nowhere. What could you recommend for something like that? What's possible?
One of the recommendations was that the Architectural Review Committee of Monterey County be involved at the front end of the process rather than at the back end of the process. So that was probably the main primary recommendation. And also that that there's more transparency with the citizens of Monterey in that particular report. So those two things were the main recommendations. By the time the citizens' complaint came in and the grand jury got to look at it, it was kind of after the fact.
So I think, though, for that particular report, something to keep in mind if you actually read the report is a lot of people were incensed about the bike path to nowhere, so that half-mile stretch that has no connection at either end, and the money that was involved. And I think that was what incensed people the most, like $10 million for this half. But what a lot of people missed, and what Monterey, the city of Monterey missed, was in the public information piece of it, because a big chunk of that money was spent on improving infrastructure that had not been touched since 1940 or whenever it was first installed. And that kind of money, I mean, that sort of project's expensive, and to be given grants from the state and from other organizations within the state to be able to do that kind of infrastructure improvement is huge. And that's why the transparency piece was a big piece of the recommendations that the report gave to the city of Monterey. Let people know that it's not just a bike path to nowhere. And also the other piece to that is there actually are plans to connect both sides, but they're working with other agencies like TAMC and the other cities to make that happen. So that was another piece that they could have been more open to the public with, that this is just phase one of a multi-phase project.
How did the judges determine open-mindedness?
So I've served on some of those interview committees of potential jurors, and a lot of times you can tell when someone answers a question where their mind is headed. We interviewed someone, and it was very obvious that this person wanted to look at public works in Monterey County. Public works in Monterey County. And then we went back and we looked at his resume, which is part of the application, and we realized why he wanted to look at public works in Monterey County, because he had an axe to grind about it. So that's one of the things. If during that interview process someone states very specifically that this is an issue they're interested in, and they serve on committees that are pro or against that, so it's during the interview process really where they'll find that. And if they don't find it, because sometimes it does happen. My first year we had a juror who actually made the selection and went to the first day of training, and all of this person's questions were related to how they could push their agenda forward. And the trainers were very emphatic that this is not a place where your agenda is going to be taken, and if all you want to do is focus on this may not be the place for you. And this person self-selected out because that person wasn't there for the second day of training, because they figured out that I'm not going to be able to do the things that I want to do here. So,
did the Monterey County Grand Jury look into the deaths in the Monterey County Jail?
We did not do a report on the Monterey County Jail, no.
I was interested because I have a friend whose son died in jail. He had mental health issues. And then I saw the Monterey County Board of Supervisors reenact the agreement with, I think it was the Wellspring, is that the name of it? Yeah. And they all 5 voted yes. And I was so surprised.
For the 2 juries that I served on, we didn't do an investigation on the jail. So that's all I can say.
I don't think there has been an investigation that's been done on the jail in the regard that you're asking about.
And there have been lawsuits involved, and it never even came out in the public until within this last year.
And that may be also one of the reasons why it's not picked up as a topic of investigation, because if a topic is proposed and the jury finds out that there is either pending litigation or existing litigation, then that's something that's hands off for us, and we'll move on to something else.
but it sounds to me like this has been a problem for many years. It's come out within the last year that this has been going on for a number of years.
Well, it has been going on for a number of years. If you reach back, I think it was 2016, there was a settlement with the Hernandez settlement, and I believe that was 2016. But this is something that could be asked about via the citizens complaint form. You could formulate a citizens.
I just want to pipe in here that most people in the room probably know that the League is part of a coalition of groups advocating for institution of a sheriff's oversight commission in our county that would have oversight over the sheriff's department, would have investigative powers and looking into things going on at the sheriff's department, including the jails. So that's something the League's involved in.
Aside from all the outings, how easy it is for you to get free access to document, and also how much reading do you have to go through?
So the access to documentations, a lot of times we'll start, our juries called it an inquiry period, where you go online on their websites or you look at past reports and you do a lot of research that way. And then once we start an investigation, then we do a request for documentation from the department or whomever we're investigating. So that's how the jury gets information. As for reading, I will tell you there's a lot of reading involved. So, and not all of it's fun reading. I mean,
I don't know about that. I found it all to be fun.
well,
but I want to address the question about how easy is it to get information. I mentioned this a little bit earlier.
Closer to the microphone.
Yes. I mentioned a little bit earlier that you make a request for information from a department. Most of the departments are really forthcoming. I mean, within a week or so, you'll get extensive amounts of information if you've asked for them. Some departments will try and blow you off. I mean, you're just there for a year. I can drag this out. I don't have to worry about this. Nothing's going to happen. Well, if the grand jury, and this may have happened on our grand jury, if the grand jury is really interested in the information and it's really important to get it, the grand jury has subpoena power. And you can start by suggesting to the subject of the investigation that a subpoena can be issued. In a soft way saying that is, would a subpoena help you to get us that information? Sort of soft. And I can tell you that the county council will back you up 100% on getting that information. So most of the time, 99% of the time, I'd say it's easy to get information and it comes quickly. It's that 1% of the time where you can pull out the hammer and show it to them.
So, having reached witching hour, I suggest that we adjourn. However, would you be willing to stay and answer questions if people want to approach them and get some final answers to the questions? Thank you so much. I think based on the interest, I think you saw a lot of interest from this particular group in the process and the information. Thank you.